since oil output in Nigeria declined mostly in April, among other organizations of the petroleum exporting countries. The latest monthly oil market report released by OPEC on Thursday shows that Nigeria's oil output dipped by 270,000 barrels per day to 999,000 barrels per day in April from 1.26 million barrels per day in March, based on direct communication. The last time Angola overtook Nigeria was in May 2022, when oil theft was rampant in Nigeria. Angola's oil production rose by 91,000 barrels per day to 1.06 million barrels per day this month, up from 978,000 barrels in March, and that's based on direct communication with OPEC. Nigeria suffered the biggest decline in production, the least in 7 months, according to government data, among its OPEC peers, which was followed by Iran, which lost 262,000 barrels per day in April, based also on direct communication with OPEC. So Africa is currently facing a crunching funding crisis on the back of crisis upon crisis, from the COVID-19 pandemic to the US-China diplomatic battle to the ongoing Russia's military assault on Ukraine. Now, the dearth of funding that the continent sorely needs is impacting on its growth and could have further impact on spendings needed for health, education, social infrastructure, and lots more. And let's get a deep dive into what all of this means for Nigeria's macroeconomic outlook in the countdown to a new administration. My guest on this is Franklin Ngwu. He's an associate professor and the director of public sector initiative at the Lagos Business School. He's live here in the studio in Lagos with me. Thank God it's another Friday. Thanks for coming through.
Thank you for inviting
me. We
me.
appreciate it. This is a very big story. Everyone is looking at this. But on Tuesday was the Lagos Business School IMF Sub-Saharan Africa Economic Outlook report for the month of April, and you've got a whole lot of big names in the room together. Tell me, what are the takeaways from the Tuesday's event?
It was an interesting event in the sense that, first of all, IMF came with bad news and also with good news. Bad news in the sense of the title, which is funding squeeze, that given what is going on globally, the expected funding that's supposed to come to Africa might have challenges. So there's a funding squeeze. And of course, because of where we are now as Africa, where we are now as different countries in Africa with high debt level, it means that the possibility of getting that funding will not be there. So that will now definitely put lives under threat. That will mean that recovery might be challenged. That will also mean that debts will accumulate, and that means that development will be retarded. So those are the challenges that we face. But of course, they also came with some solutions in terms of some of the things that we can do to possibly escape this global funding squeeze.
How serious is the funding gap right now for Africa when you look at what our coach Christian calls the IMF Managing Director, crisis on top of crisis?
I think it's very serious, because if you look at most sub-Saharan African countries are in high debt. Nigeria is a typical example where we are getting close to almost something trillion. And of course, just a few days ago, the president sent a request to the National Assembly asking for $800 million. And that is how it is in some other African countries, but not to the level. I mean, there are differences in different...
Quite a number of African countries. Look at Senegal. Even about almost 75 days to GDP.
So
Ghana, Kenya,
South, and some other countries in sub-Saharan Africa.
So debt is a huge level. That is difficult for any African country so far this year to go to the global Eurobond market.
Exactly. And of course, since spring last year, no country in Africa has gone to Euro market. And of course, also, China as well is becoming more prudent with the way they lend. Inflation is high globally. And of course, so when you now go to the market to raise funds, interest rate will be high. When they now consider that risk, it means that it's going to be, you're going to be facing a lot of challenges. So the funding squeeze is real. The debt problem in Africa is real. And that now opens up a lot of challenges for sub-Saharan Africa.
But what are the imperatives for Nigeria under this scenario of a likely prolonged geopolitics? China and US during Donald Trump era, then Russia jumped in with the Ukraine crisis, then you've got India also in there. So what's the imperative for Nigeria here, looking at all these headwinds?
I think it will be challenging for Nigeria. It's already proven proving that.
It's challenging already, isn't it?
It is. It is very, very challenging, actually, in the sense that if you look at what is going on, if you look at the indices, almost all socioeconomic variables are heading south. Is it FDI? Is it FPI? Is it unemployment? Is it inflation? Is it interest rate? So everything seems to be going in the wrong direction. So the question then is, what do we do? How do we resolve this? Because if we continue like this, as I said, we already have about 130 million Nigerians classified as multidimensionally poor. And if this funding squeeze continues, if we don't do something about it, and of course the critical areas of development, education, health, infrastructure will be impaired.
So I'm trying to find out, therefore, in this very short conversation, where can we find investment? Where will Nigeria find investment? Where can we find cash flow to pay salaries, to leverage our debt, to deleverage debt, as it were, I meant to say, and to do a whole lot of other things? Where can we find that money, and how quickly do you think we got to do that? A new administration is just about 2 weeks around the corner.
I think there are a few things that we can do. From the fiscal side, from the monetary side, from the exchange rate side, and from the kind of structural reforms, which IMF actually identified. So from the fiscal side, you have to say, okay, how do you make sure, for example, certain things that are not important should not even be there? How do we even expand the tax base? How do we tame inflation? But you cannot also be increasing the money supply and at the same time taming inflation as well. And if you go to the foreign exchange, how do we have a more stable and transparent foreign exchange? Then in the structural reforms that we need to do as well, how do we reduce government expenditure? How do we diversify the economy? How do we increase productivity? How do we do? So when you bring all this together, of course, there will be a little room. And particularly in Nigeria, for example, is how do you reduce leakages? Because in different areas of our governance, you see all kinds of
oil theft, for example.
So of course, we are not even producing what we are supposed to produce. So the question is, if you look at all these areas, there are rooms, but it requires effective, accountable, and responsible leadership, committed to make a change, committed to take Nigeria from this present situation that we are to a point of progress, committed to move Nigeria from consumption to be a productive economy. Because everything seems to be imported, of course, which is now exacerbating our foreign exchange challenges and all that, our debt level, as the case may be. And if you look at last month, what was shared according to the treaties of government went down by over 250 billion. It indicates that the governors need to also rethink as well. So even if we're talking about the federal government, and most of them depending on the federal government in terms of the FAC allocations, as it's going down, of course, they have to rethink and innovate in their respective subnationals to see what they can do.
Are you hopeful that we will be able to hit the ground running from June the 1st?
It's challenging because of so many issues. So many issues. There's economic issues, there are social issues, there are political issues, there are leadership issues. So how do you resolve all these issues? So that's the number one point. But the main thing is, how do we even create a kind of credibility and legitimacy in the process that we are about to.
Credibility and legitimacy for both local and foreign investors. That's the point.
To come in, exactly.
Yes.
And like if you notice, in terms of foreign portfolio investment, it's going down because people believe that Nigeria, which is really true, that Nigeria is there's a lot of instability, uncertainty, volatility, and ambiguity about everything that we are doing.
You mean there's no clarity?
No, there's no clarity.
As to where we're going, really.
Exactly. From the elections, no clarity. From the economy, no clarity. From social issues, no clarity. From in terms of actually creating an inclusive society, no clarity. And that's why we say that is a volatile environment, it's uncertain, it's ambiguous, and it's complex.
And that makes putting money as an investor in Nigeria a little bit difficult.
Exactly, because of course, some people will say, let me continue to earn, even if it's 1%, 2% in UK,
or the US Treasury.
Or the US Treasury, than coming to Nigeria to earn, even if you give them 10%, because of this uncertainty that we've enumerated. So it's very important that the government creates...
That the new administration
creates a bit of stability, a bit of guidance, a bit of, trying to give signals, optics, that we are serious in terms of what we are doing in Nigeria. that we are serious about welcoming investors, that we are serious about regulatory impact, about regulatory quality, that we are serious about rule of law, that we are serious about government effectiveness. When we are serious in these key governance indicators, you find out that both local investors and foreign investors will start gradually coming into it. Remember that this is a country of over 200 million consumers. So it is naturally attractive to both local and foreign investors. So it's only left for us to do the right thing, and this place will be a magnet of different types of investors.
So technically, talent is not enough.
It's not enough at all. Not at all. Not at all. We have to do things properly so that things will start happening.
Okay, let's see how it all comes. We're just about two weeks into a new administration, and we're going to touch base with you perhaps as soon as we have a new president in office. Then, of course, we've got to drill down into what you think the economic agenda could be from a public sector initiative where you are holding forth at the Lagos Business School. Thank you so much. And this is for TGIF. Thank you so much for coming on a Friday evening for those perspectives. Have a great weekend. Dr. Franklin Ngwu, Associate Professor and Director of Public Sector Initiative at the Lagos Business School.